Okay, well, welcome to our final class on our lecture series of what I wish I'd learned in my temple prep class. This is going to be our final video for this series that we're doing right now. I do have some more videos that'll be complementary to this series that I'm going to be coming out with later. Like, we didn't get into a lot of doctrinal stuff and church teachings around temple concepts and ideas. So I've got a whole class on the plan of salvation, a whole course that I'm putting together that will be very complementary to what you learn in the temple, and so that'll be effective to have. But that's gonna be a little while before I come out with that the rest of the way. Um, and most of it's just time to put all these recordings together and things. So if we get enough people saying they're interested in that class, maybe I can bump that one up a little bit quicker. So leave in the comments what you think about that, or if you have questions about the temple that this course didn't answer for you, uh, please put them in the comments, and maybe I'll make a couple extra follow-up videos on some of those questions also. So today, to kind of pull it all together, if you will, for this class, um, I want to talk about what to expect when you go to the temple, as well as what are some of the different rooms in the temple. Uh, what to expect of the temple is, for the most part, quite standard across a lot of temples in the church. I mean, the church, as of right now, has over 160 operating temples worldwide, and almost another 100 and almost another 200 practically in some stage of announcement to planning to construction to they're building temples at an amazing rate, which is really nice. Uh, so when you go to the temple, okay, so you've already taken the time to go to like a Deseret Industries building to get your temple garments and things, so you're ready for that. Um, you want to have at least one pair of those with you, and the rest will be at home for after the temple. You want to have get your white clothing, get all that, the packet of things for the endowment. If you don't have a Deseret, not a Deseret Industries, the Deseret book around you where you can get these things, then you can order them online as well to have them brought out for you. So you have all that. You're going to the temple. When you walk in to the front doors of the temple, there's usually going to be a desk of some type, some kind of a partition, basically, and you'll see as you walk in, there'll be like a little computer or monitor there and a scanner, like a little scanner that's put in a little. They've kind of rigged the scanners in these little boxes so they just kind of aim at one spot, and then you take your temple recommend, and there's a barcode on it, and you slide it in underneath the scanner, and it reads it, and the person at that desk or that booth will say, "Oh, welcome, brother so and so or sister so and so to the temple," and then they let you in. So what that does is, when you scan that, it double checks. It shows them your name, and it shows if it's a valid recommend or not, basically. So if somebody comes in with an expired recommend, they can hit it and they'll say, "Oh, it's expired," and they'll stop you right there and then work with you on that. If you do happen to accidentally have an expired recommend and just forgot to get it renewed, or maybe you go to the temple without your recommend, you forgot it, then oftentimes what you need to do is just work with the people. I know it's a completely embarrassing situation, and you'll probably go to the temple at least once without your recommend, and have to go through that experience. It happens. It inevitably happens. You'll forget it. It's not something some people carry it around in their wallets and have it with them all the time. Some people put it in their temple bag, so it's always with their temple clothing. But sometimes, again, you forget it. You forgot to put it back after last time, or you got it out to go to a sealing for somebody else or a wedding or something, and things happen, and sometimes you'll forget it. And what happens with that procedure is you just say, "Oh, I forgot my temple recommend," and they will pull you aside. There's some rooms, some offices that you'll go in. They can sit down with you and look up your information. Um, I think it's a little easier now because of the electronics. They can look you up in the system to see if there's any valid recommend for you, basically, which should work out fine for you. If not, then they usually have to place a phone call to your bishop or a stake presidency member to gain authorization for you to go through the temple. So it was convenient. I forgot mine once, and it was during a ward temple night activity. And so my bishop happened to be there. So they just pulled my bishop aside with me and they said, "Is he okay to come in?" And they're like, he's like, "Yep, we interviewed him just a couple months ago. It's fine." And I still was able to go in. So it is a little embarrassing. It's kind of awkward, but they try to make it as less of a weird experience as they can. So they work with you, and they want to help you out. Do not give your recommend to somebody else to go in and pose as you to the temple. You'll get your recommend removed, revoked for that. That's not good, because that person hasn't deemed themselves worthy to enter the temple. So don't share recommends. That's not a good idea. So anyways, once you've gone through that stage, you show your recommend, basically, then you walk in to the temple. If you are going only for baptisms for the dead, oftentimes either it will be in that front lobby, there'll be a door on one of the sides that you can go downstairs to the baptistry without having to go into the rest of the temple to get to it, because usually the youth or people who have limited use recommends can go that way down and not have to go through they don't have the proper recommend to get into the rest of the temple. So they'll go to the sides. Some temples, it's a side door to the temple itself that they will enter through to go to the baptistry. They don't have to go to the front main doors. They can go around to the side, to a side door to get into the baptistry. It just depends on how the temple is set up. There's different designs, different trends, and things that have happened over time. And the baptistry, you'll get taken care of. So let's review the baptistry just real quick while we're talking about that. So when you go into the baptistry, they'll scan your recommend there. There's usually a place where you can sit and you can, there's benches, like you can observe the Baptist ordinances going on. So there'll be like a big glass window. On the other side of it will be the font out there, basically, and then you'll see where there'll be the dressing rooms on either side that, for men and women, where they can go in and then they can change into some white clothes, like a white jumper, to be baptized in, basically. So then you'll go into the baptistry room, and then you'll wait your turn, and the beauty is there's so many patrons, there's so many people like that are volunteering to work at the temple, that you just ask them, "Oh, what do I do next? What do I do?" And they'll help you out. They're wonderful people, and they're there to just help you basically have a good experience at the temple. So really great to work with. Never be afraid to ask them questions and ask for help, because that's what they're there for, is to help you. So it's they're not there to judge you or anything like that. They're there to help you, which is great. When you do baptisms, you'll do the baptistry, get the baptizing, and then they'll give you a towel when you're done. You'll go out, and then in the dressing rooms are shower areas, changing areas, things like that, so you can get cleaned up after doing baptisms. There's a couple usually rooms off to the side of that waiting area in the baptistry where they do confirmations. So after you're baptized and you are confirmed a member of the church and are given the gift of the Holy Ghost, and so they have those rooms there. So when you're done doing the baptizing, you can go into there and do the confirming as well. So that's kind of a fun little place to go and to do baptisms for the dead, basically. And it is in the basement. It is underground, because in the scriptures it talks about where would the dead congregate. Well, if they're all dead, their bodies are buried under the ground, so they would be under the ground. So they put the baptistries in the basement of the temples, below ground, basically. So that's a fun place to go. Go do baptistries. There's a lot of fun things to see in those baptistry areas, especially in some of the pioneer temples, like St. George, Manti, Salt Lake City, Logan temples. Those pioneer temples sometimes have some pretty ornateness to them. So let's go back up to the main entrance. You go in through your temple recommend. Again, how it's laid out is going to be a little different based upon the temple, but oftentimes you will enter into an area and there'll be people standing around, just their whole job is just to direct you and help you. They'll direct you to your appropriate dressing rooms for men and for women. You'll go into the dressing rooms, and then there will be people in there that'll help you to say, are you here for like initiatory ordinance or an endowment? And if you say, I'm here for initiatory, then they will direct you over to the side area where they have a few lockers and the initiatory rooms. So when you go into there, you'll use those lockers, get yourself checked in, say, hey, I'm here for my appointment. Okay, great. They'll get the names ready for you. You'll go get changed into your temple clothing, basically. So not the packet, that's for the endowment, just the white clothing, basically. And then you'll go in and they will give you some names, and then they will direct you to a waiting, kind of a staging area. So initiatories, like we talked about in the video on initiatories, there's 3 rooms, basically 3 parts to that ordinance, and each one is done in a separate room. And so you'll go into a waiting room, which is the 4th room. It's like, imagine a square broken up into 4 parts. One's a little temporary waiting room, and then you go into one room to do the beginning of the ordinance, then the next stage, and then the final stage, and then you go back to the waiting room, go back around to do the next name, basically. So you go through those rooms. When you're done with those names, you take them back to the desk for the initiatory ordinances, and then there'll be people there that will take those names, and then they'll scan all the QR codes in and get them all entered into the system, so that those names are now available for the next ordinance, which would be your endowment ordinance after they've gone through the initiatory. So if you're going through for the first time, when you get to the temple, there will be people that are going to be waiting for you at the temple workers, that their job is just to help you out. They'll put a little piece of paper like on your lapel or something, on a collar, that just says you're there for live ordinance, and everybody in the temple knows, take extra care of you. They're there to help you out. So if you have family or friends that are there with you that have been through the temple, have been endowed, then they can also be there to assist you and help you. But the people in the temple workers, are just there. They'll bend over backwards to help you, which is wonderful. It should be a really good experience for you when you go. They'll guide you around. You just have to follow them, basically. Just go here, do this, do this. Okay, great. You don't have to do a lot of thinking. You just have to follow them, and they'll help you through it, which is really nice. So they'll get you over to the dressing rooms. They have special dressing rooms just for live ordinance people. So it's kind of nice. They take care of you when you're at the temple for your first time. And then they'll walk around and guide you in the things that you're doing, which is really great. So you'll go through the initiatory ordinance first, then you'll get ready to go to the endowment ordinance. And usually what you'll do for the endowment is so if you're done with initiatories, you got to go back to the dressing room, get your packet, the robes of the holy priesthood, basically that little packet that you have with all those clothes in it that you'll put on during the endowment ceremony. And if you want more information on that, look at our video on the clothing in the temple. We talk about that, as well as our video on the endowment ceremony itself. Then you'll go to another room. So you'll leave the dressing room. You will get, if you're going through, again, for yourself, there is an ordinance of a new name that we didn't talk about on any of the other videos. So let's, I guess, pause for a second and bring this up. There is an ordinance of the new name. So everybody is given a new name. This new name is usually a biblical or scriptural type name that is given to you. If you go to like the digital version of the scriptures and type in new name as one phrase to use, you can find where this is not an uncommon thing that has happened. Abram was given a new name, Abraham. His wife Sarah was Sarai. So his name was changed. Jacob's name was changed to Israel in the Old Testament. So sometimes this concept of a new name is given literally in ancient scripture. A lot of times in the temples today, it's more symbolic than literal. So if you think about it, everybody that goes through the temple that day is getting that name, basically. But it's more meant to help us understand that we are taking upon ourselves a new name. Just like when we get married, a woman takes upon herself the name usually of her husband. When we go through the temple, we're taking upon us Christ's name. When you get baptized, you are taking upon you his name. So that those teachings and ideas come into play. And that name, when you get this new name in the temple, it is to be used in the endowment ceremony towards the end of the ceremony at a special place, and they will instruct you on how all that works. So you do that, you get your new name, and then you will go to a room, usually called a chapel. So they have a room in the temple that is a chapel. There's usually an organ in there, so someone could be in there playing some soft church music, some hymns, or a lot of them now are electronic organs, and so they've pre-programmed the songs in, and they just hit the button, and it runs through a whole bunch of songs out of the hymn book, basically. This is a place where most people, for men and women to gather to get ready to go into a session, is what it's called. So an endowment session is the term that's usually used. So you'll go to the chapel, you'll wait there for everybody else in your group to come together. And then when enough people are together to be ready to go to the session, then they will pause the music. Someone will get up in the front and announce, hey, this is the 2:30 session, or whatever it is. You know, if you're part of the party of sister so-and-so or brother so-and-so or whoever it is doing their living ordinance, then you need to be in this party. So if you please follow me and this other person, we will take you to the endowment room. And then you'll stand up row by row, you know, kind of orderly fashion, and go upstairs. Usually the endowment rooms are on a higher level. They have elevators, so if you need elevators, you can use those or go upstairs. Then you go to an endowment room. I believe most modern temples today, so the endowment has, as far as rooms geographically speaking, has changed over the years. If you and I hope the Salt Lake Temple still retains their rooms in there. So if you go to the Salt Lake Temple, and this used to be in the Manti Temple as well, a lot of these pioneer temples, because they built these temples before electronics and a lot of electricity was really utilized, and so all that had to be put in later in some of these temples. They had different rooms you would go to. So you'd go into an initial room, like a creation type room, and then you'd move from so to go over the creative periods and stuff. Then there'd be a Garden of Eden room, and then you'd go to like that'd be kind of and then they get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. You know, Adam and Eve would leave Garden of Eden, a telestial room, a terrestrial room, and then the final celestial room. So if you've done live session in these older temples, the pioneer temples, you've had to move to 4 or 5 different rooms basically to make it work. Some temples, they went away from this eventually, and they started to just have one room. Basically, you go meet in this room, and they just use lighting to change that, you know, to give you a denotion, kind of delineate out. You've gone from one state of being to the next state of being, you know, if you will, basically. So that's more common. It's definitely saves a lot of space. You have less rooms you have to build, and you can have more endowment rooms to get more people through the temple. So it just was more economical to use lighting to delineate a transition point rather than literally move to another room. So you probably won't see that movement as much to new rooms as it used to be. Sometimes they'll have one room where you'll do all your instruction in and everything else, and they'll have another room is where you introduce to the temple veil, and then they do their instructions there, and then you go through to the celestial room. So sometimes it's divided up. Sometimes the temple will just have the veil in the room and just have a curtain there that they move the curtain, and there's the veil, and then you go in. So it could be a couple rooms. You could have an endowment room, and then there's always at minimum an endowment room and a celestial room. Sometimes there's an endowment room and then a veil room, temple veil room, and then the celestial room. Sometimes there's more. Most of the time, it's at least the endowment room and the celestial room. So there's a few variations in different temples. As you go to different temples, you'll start to see some of these variations. It's just different ways of doing the same same ordinance basically. But when you do these, so you do the endowment, you they introduce you to the temple veil and the things that you do there. Most of the things around the temple veil are the things that are not allowed to be talked about outside of the temple. So that's, if you watch videos like my videos or other people's videos about the temple, that's the part they don't get into, because we have all been asked not to talk about the procedures and things that happen at the temple veil, basically. But that's kind of the culmination of the endowment ceremony, is instructing you what to do there. When you go through that process, then you are admitted into the celestial room, which, if you ever go on a temple tour, like an open house, the celestial room is by far probably one of the most beautiful rooms in the entire temple. It's the room where most people want to go. So that's where like the ordinances kind of end up, basically in the celestial room. It is a great place to be. It is a place that after you go through an endowment, you can sit in the celestial room and you can pray, and they have scriptures in there that you can borrow and read and study, and you can ponder. A lot of people will go through an endowment ceremony so they can go to the celestial room, so they can talk with God and seek answers and revelations to challenge their problems they have in their life. It's where people say, when I went to the temple to ponder and seek wisdom. That's usually where they're going, is the celestial room. Most of the time, you have to go through the endowment ceremony to get to the celestial room. I think there are occasions where, if you're a temple worker, you can just go sit in the celestial room, which is nice. It's a wonderful room. It's a very ornate room. It is symbolic of entering into the presence of God again. It's a great place to be. It's usually the room when you go through temple open houses that, again, it's beautiful. People really love the feeling they get when they're there. It's just a different palpable feeling than a sense of happiness or rest or peace outside the temple, basically. But that's usually where you go. Now, if you are doing sealings, which is another ordinance we talked about, then there is a different room that you will go to, usually not far from where the celestial room and endowment rooms are your sealing rooms. These are rooms where, if you've gone through the, again, temple open house, they are the rooms that have the altar in the middle with a little knee cushion around it. And then you'll see on one side there'll be like a couple of chairs, 3 chairs set up, maybe a little table, and then a couple rows of chairs on the sides, and then the big mirrors above those chairs, kind of basically facing each other, so you get that infinity look. You'll go to a sealing room. Now, there is a waiting room near what's called the sealer's office. So the people that are running, that their job is to be responsible for the sealing rooms and handling the sealing procedures. There's an office for them to meet at and get things organized. You can often meet at that room, at the sealer's office. And then when you and your people in your group are together, then they'll take you into a sealing room with a sealer. So a sealer is a person who's been given that authority to seal for weddings and families and things. We did a whole video on the sealing ordinance, so you can watch that to get more details on that. But there's usually in a temple a bunch of sealing rooms. These are used for weddings, basically sealing/weddings. They're used for sealing husbands and wives together, children to parents together, and that's another ordinance that you can go and do. So you go to those rooms, they'll instruct you what to do, and if you're doing it for the dead, then you'll have names of people, either spouses that need to be married to each other, or sealed to each other, I should say, or you have children that need to be sealed to their parents, and then different people will act in different roles to represent the parents and the children, and to go through that ordinance. It's an easy ordinance. The beauty of that one is you don't have much to do. That's a pretty easy one to do. So they're kind of fun to do those ordinances. When you're done with those, then you go back down and to the locker rooms and change your clothes and get ready, and most people will leave the temple at that point. Now, there are other rooms in the temple. There's some offices, other office space in the temple for the temple president and his counselors to do things. There's usually a room that the temple workers can meet in to have instruction, to teach and help them to learn. So when new temple workers are coming in, they can get instructions on what they're going to do. They can use that room to coordinate. Okay, we need so many people in this area, so many people over this area. Older temples, you will find cafeterias in the temple, usually in the basement. Some temples after the pioneer era, basically, some temples they started putting cafeterias in because people were saying, "Hey, I'm working all day in the temple, but I also need to eat and get water and drinks." And so I, that if like you work at the temple and then you've got to leave the temple to go get lunch, then that means you have to change your clothes and go out get lunch and then come back, change back into your temple clothes and then go back in and do everything. So what they started to do is put a cafeteria in the basement of the temple. So you could go as you work at the temple, you could go downstairs and they would have people that their job, basically they're paid to serve food. They would cook food and serve food and do dishes and things down there. Had like a mini cafeteria. So you could go down, you could get food. It wasn't free. You had to pay for the food. That's how they basically paid for the salaries and energy costs and efforts of doing it. Was provided as a service. So sometimes it used to be where couples would go to the temple and they would call it, dinner and a movie type idea, because most temples use a video for, instead of live sessions for endowments, it's a video. And so they could go through and do a session and then go down in the basement of the temple and eat at the cafeteria and then go home. That has been going away with the advent of the mini temples that President Hinckley introduced. They started getting rid of those. So most temples today that have a cafeteria in them aren't used anymore. It's just empty space now. So sometimes the temple will say if you want to bring your own food in, you can store it there in like a fridge and then you can get it out. Like if you're doing a ward temple night, sometimes you can bring food and just reserve the cafeteria area for your ward, and you could meet there to congregate after you've gone through the temple, have a treat or something. So some temples still have them. We just don't use them much anymore. There also oftentimes were laundry services where you could go. So there would be rooms usually near where the locker rooms are, where you can rent temple clothing. So if you're like, oh, I forgot to bring socks, white socks, or I forgot my some of my temple clothing at home, or it got ruined or soiled or something, you could go rent it. For it costs like a whole $1 to rent everything to be in the temple. So if you forgot your stuff, you could go rent it. They had a laundry service too, where you would just take off those rented clothes, put them in some baskets, and then they would go get laundered. With the advent of the mini temples that President Hinckley did, that started to go away. They encouraged everyone to buy and own their own temple clothes, and then they shrunk the size of temples, which made it more economical to build them. They didn't need as much land, they didn't need as much expense on them, and so they could build them a little faster and in other areas where they didn't have as much accessibility to things. So that was one of those. The laundry service was one thing that's been cut out of a lot of temples. So you won't see that as much today as it used to be. So some of the older temples from the 20th century, you'll see those rooms there, but they're not there as much anymore. And then there's other rooms like in the Salt Lake Temple and some of the temples. There's a Holy of Holies. I think most temples have a Holy of Holies in them. This is a small room usually that is basically not accessed by anybody but the prophet. So the prophet can go to the Holy of Holies because it's supposed to be the most sacred of sacred spots in the entire temple. And I think most temples have a Holy of Holies. I could be wrong on that, and if you know more, please feel free to put it in the comments. But I think most temples have a Holy of Holies. It's usually a small room, out of the way, not usually seen by the average temple person. Now, if you go to the Salt Lake Temple, assuming they haven't changed anything in their recent renovations, The Holy of Holies, actually, there's a door from the celestial room to the Holy of Holies. Like from inside the celestial room, you can get into the Holy of Holies. It is locked. There's usually a vase or something ornamental in front of it to discourage you from going up to it. But that's the Holy of Holies. Most of the time, you can get at it from a big wooden door on the other side. You kind of walk past some of the offices that were there. But this is kind of a traditional room to put into temples. Like I says, I don't know in some of the more newer construction temples if they've included those in these temples or not. It could have been taken out of temples and not needed as much, but I'm not sure. It could also be theoretically added, but it's just not a room that's used for anybody but the prophet. That's where the prophet could go, like the high priest in the tabernacle of Moses. That's where the high priest goes once a year to work directly with God, basically. So it is a place where the prophet can go to gain revelation and more guidance. But like I says, it's like the prophet goes to every temple and uses that room. So I don't know if they actually include it in most of the temples that are built today. But for the most part, that's the temples. That's kind of what it's like when you go through. Again, there's lots of people there to help you. Always ask for help. Pride is one thing you never want to take with you into the temple because it'll just make it a bad experience for you. Just realize it's a community. It's a family. They're there to help you and take care of you. So never feel bad about goofing up or making a mistake or other things because we're all human. It's okay. It's totally okay. Just go have a good experience. Learn. If you just focus on learning one thing every time you go and let the Spirit teach you, you'll be amazed at what you'll learn. Absolutely amazed at what you'll learn. If that's all you do is just keep your mind open, let the Spirit influence you just to try to think of, learn one new little thing every time you go, and it'll make your experience very worthwhile as you continue to go to the temple. So I hope you've enjoyed this course that we've done. Stick around. We've got more courses coming. Still doing my college courses as well. Still got the scriptures. We're finishing up the Old Testament and getting ready to do New Testament. So we're gonna have some fun videos there. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Like the videos. If you have other questions about the temple we haven't answered, put them in the comment section, and I'll try to help answer those either through the comments or maybe make a follow-up video for you. And share the videos out. Let more people know these videos are here for free to help people so that they can continue to learn and improve their understanding as well. Thanks. We'll talk to you later.